afternoon, Log Nation. This is Jerry Ottinger. I'm your Chief Learning Officer for LOA, and I run LOA University. Today, we are going to bring you, with our fall offerings, Mr. Joshua Atkinson. He's a Navy Academy grad, and he currently works for PM-ProLearn. He's a big thinker, disruptive thinker who focuses his life largely, as I've known him, on helping the DoD gain the skills so that we can better address problems. And so we can come up with those creative solutions and the new types of solutions that we require as we face new challenges in times where we're going to face reduced resources and inflation, other things going to make our lives more difficult. The goal is to get you all with some more tools in your bag. So when you face a problem, you can actually reach in and have some learning and introduction. This is part 1 of 2. We're going to do this to a deeper level in the spring. With that, though, I'm going to hand it over, Josh. The floor is yours.
Awesome, AJ. I really appreciate the chance. Honored to be a part of LOAU as a Marine Corps Loggie myself. Love what LOA is trying to do, love what LOAU is trying to do, and really excited to talk today about something a little bit odd and maybe a little bit uncomfortable, right, as we want to try to disrupt and build the right culture across the force, right? And to your point, how do we integrate industry best practices to make our leaders in uniform better today, set up for the peer fight, then also start looking at creating some of that job credibility down the road and in the future. So excited for this and excited to be coming back in LOA 2023. So all that being said, title of the presentation today is called Leading in a Constrained Environment, right? Seeing limitations as a force multiplier, right? Why we need to learn to say no. Okay, I experienced some of this on my experience on active duty as a loggie. This came out of a lot of my own professional experiences, my own discussions with professionals, and really just seeing the industry world as well on how do you build high-performing cultures and teams. And sometimes it's that need for the honest feedback that says, I'm not ready yet, right? So introduction, as I said, I'm a Naval Academy grad. My name is Josh Atkinson. I am a project manager, a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. I'm a master logistician, also a change manager. I had the privilege to deploy twice to Afghanistan, both with joint forces, right? Once with NATO, the other one was SOCOM and human intelligence. I'm now the chief strategy officer and one of the founders of PM-ProLearn, and really want to just help people learn to think differently. All right, so always good for planning. There's some assumptions going forward today, right? We're going to make some assumptions that we are not really able to calculate total force readiness as of right now, right? We're going to acknowledge that zero defect culture is a reality. Right, we're going to assume that resources are reducing and budgets are getting smaller and manpower is also getting smaller. All right, we're going to make an assumption the words I can't and no, I'm not ready are seldom spoken. Okay, we're also going to make the assumption that real and honest discussions about readiness and current capability are not had at the proper levels in order for us to actually address root problems, right? And on the last one, we're going to assume that we're actually not solving the problem knowing what the root cause is, right? This doesn't mean we're not taking good action. We're solving things, but we're not possibly going down far enough to solve the right problem, and therefore we're leading to waste. All right, so the agenda, part 1, does the environment affect how we lead? Okay, the next part's gonna be building a cultural foundation, and the third part's gonna be using the tools that we have at our disposal, where I'll start working at integrating things that DoD already does and start talking some best practices in industry as well. All right, so kicking out the foundational questions. Do we lead, plan, and act differently depending on the abundance of our resources, right? In the military, right? If we have excess sustainment, excess supply, excess manpower, do we lead the same way as we would in a limited environment, right? Think about investing, and I'm going to use that as an analogy today as well, on do we invest and spend money differently in our personal lives if we know that there's always growth, if we know that we have excess, right? If we do lead differently, if we do behave differently, why? Right? Why do we behave differently based on the environment that we're working in? Right. And the last point is the environment changes from a time of plenty to a time of want. What do we need to do differently? Right? What do we need to change with how we lead, how we plan, and how we act? Okay. And I would argue that we definitely behave differently depending on the environment. All right. So investing in a bull market, right? Hey, we're investing in a growth market. Many of us don't really care where our money goes as long as it's going to grow. Okay, maybe we missed some better opportunities, but all in all, we don't care as much, right? Because my money's good. It's going to keep on growing. It's going to keep on improving. As long as it's growing, I'm okay, right? leading, or rather planning in an excess environment is much the same, right? I may not focus as much on the solution as long as the solution works. It might not be the best solution, but there are so many options at my disposal, right? But what happens when the market changes? Okay, in excess, we lead. I've got redundant supply. I've got an iron mountain behind me. I've got warranties. I've got people so motivated to join the service because there's a war to fight. I don't really care if I'm a bad leader. I may not be as invested because the consequences are not as catastrophic. Okay, but what about constraint, right? What about a constrained environment? Or when the market starts to drop, our human behavior technically changes, right? Some may choose to ride it out and say, oh, I'll just hold it, I'm okay. If you have that luxury, right? But if your livelihood is based on the growth and now it's not coming in anymore, that creates emotional consternation and panic. Some may choose to move their investments around, right? To stabilize things. Overall, though, our actions are different. They're usually much more calculated, right? And in some cases, there's a consequence we didn't think about. I invested in something that I may not have thought about much, but then all of a sudden the floor dropped out and my 20% upside became a 60% downside. And now it really hurts, right? Now that decision that wasn't made to the same level of clarity and focus has a catastrophic consequence. Okay, some may think that that's happening now in terms of retention and how we behave in the military. Okay, in a constraint, we cannot just pick any solution and be successful. In fact, some solutions we might have picked, like I said, have a massive consequence. And this seems to be where we are, right? Agree or disagree, that's the point that we're going to talk about. A leadership-like investing changes depending on the abundance of your resources and the excess that you have, or access to excess resources. Okay? Expeditionary planning across the line of departure versus an established environment require you to take different risks, think differently, and more importantly, trust farther down the chain of command and have different tools. Okay, so how do you lead in a time of plenty, right? Many people say that leadership is leadership, but I would actually disagree, right? Leadership is leadership, but how you lead changes. Okay, the amount of grace you have as a leader changes in times of plenty, right? The past 20 years have seen many of us living in a time of excess. We have excess budgets, excess manpower, excess supplies and logistics, and excess motivation and purpose, okay, onto the emotional side of the house. There's been a good economy and a personal growth and security along with it. Okay, but there's a consequence to this bounty that we've lived in. Maybe lack of detailed planning, lack of detailed communication, right? A lack of emotional consideration to our decision making, right? Do I really care about the policy change that I made? Because people leave, they don't leave, right? Their emotional connectedness to service has something greater than my policy right now, right? There's a lack of need for pushback. I don't really need to fight it anymore. I'm going to get what I want. I'm okay. I'm going to promote, right? Excess has to do with promotion rates and retention rates, because I know that no matter how bad I am, I'm going to promote. I don't need to try very hard, right? There's a willingness to tolerate others or tolerate errors because it's not that bad, right? And there are multiple easy solutions in times of excess. Okay, moving into a time of constraint, right? Times are now not what they were in the war years. Budgets are lower. Manpower is lower. There's a lack of emotional motivation, right? There's no war to fight, right? So policy like CRT and COVID and the actions that we're taking have now had emotional impacts on service members and how well they feel valued going forward, right? There's increased scrutiny, right? Due to constraint, right? The zero defect starts getting tighter and we start looking for scapegoats. There's a lack of options for solutions. There's a push for innovation. And yet now we have this frozen middle, right? The vision from the top doesn't mean buy-in or safety to act in the middle or at the bottom. And yet we're trying to create that culture change, right? We're trying to do the right things, but now our decisions in excess are having consequences. And now the decisions we make in constraints are causing more consequences. Okay. Then there's the idea of always adding more. Right? Throughout my career, talking with many folks today, we're always trying to now do more with less. Okay, maybe we should do less with less, right? It seems like more and more requirements get added to the plate and a few things ever get removed because culturally we never want to say no. Okay, many times it feels like no one's listening at the top when the bottom is screaming that we can't add any more. Okay, I've talked to many people saying, look, I was scheduled for leave. I was scheduled for time off. They go, nope, you're the only one left. Cancel all your leave. It's use or lose. I'm sorry, I don't care. Now, these individuals are near retirement, so they'll tolerate it. But a lot of the junior folks are like, I'm out. Right? I'm done being used. Okay, the lack of listening or awareness is a huge risk that we may not be ready as we want to be. And it may be contributing to a shut up and color viewpoint, which creates a bad work environment and is hurting retention. Okay, at the same time, we're trying to make change. Through these times, the Air Force is taking and undergoing one of its biggest cultural changes ever, right? General Brown is trying to do a lot, which I believe in, on innovate or accelerate change or lose. Right? He pushed out another article, which I'll address later, that says, take chances, ask forgiveness, not permission. And while I believe in those things, there has to be a culture of safety or it's suicide. All right, here's a concept called lowering the water level. This comes from the Toyota Way, right? It's a great concept that looks at resources like water in a stream. When resources are plentiful, the stream flows and covers up many of the hidden rocks down below, right? Few people care about the rocks because the overall stream is flowing. The system is working. The mission is being made, and the downstream effects are not impacted. But as the water level lowers, the rocks start becoming exposed. Ultimately, these rocks are going to affect what happens downstream, and this is why we're talking today. Rocks are starting to be exposed, but what do we do about it? And have we given the tools necessary to our leaders to make the changes they need to make? Okay, in order to improve the flow of water, we can no longer just add more water, right? We have to look at ways to remove the rocks in the way. Right.
Hey, and on that, so fascinating. Identifying some of those rocks can be really beneficial at this point. I would think of things like, the same age weapon systems, we could just do a slap on, or we could just do some new modifications or new engines. You hear conversation where, we're going to have to pick something. We're going to have to retire something. We're going to have to stop doing something in order to have the resources to modernize. And that makes this very, very important as we go. Can you talk through that just a little more on what rocks you see? I think your perspective is vital on that versus some of us on the inside.
Yeah, I mean, some of the rocks I think are just, operational demands. Could be a rock, right? Hey, I've got all these requirements and I don't have enough time to actually get it done. Right. So manpower, as an overall requirement, like, hey, I have so many tasks I have to accomplish. You mandate so many tasks to the individual airmen, and yet I don't have enough airmen to do the mission tasks as well. Right. So even annual training or readiness training or the schools I have to go to. Right. And then some of the rocks could be just bureaucratic flow. Right. How do I take an idea and get it into acquisition? No, the rock is simply how many review steps are in the process, because I'm too willing to take risk. I'm too unwilling to allow a decision to be made by a colonel or a major, because that might look bad on my record. So everything comes to the colonel's desk, right? And I've heard this said from others, even at General Brown's level, he's signing documents that in 06 should probably sign because culturally no one wants to take the ownership of that risk, right? So bureaucratic rocks, manpower rocks, training requirement rocks, right? Or the COCOM demand side of the house, right? Every COCOM has the same demand. They keep asking for more and everyone keeps telling them yes. Well, those rocks, right? The limited factor, I can't execute all the missions we're being assigned right now, right? Those are rocks. The flow, the resources are finite and they're lowering, and yet the demands, the throughput demands are getting bigger, right? Some cultural rocks. Okay, do I allow my team to speak up or not, right? Sometimes it's policy rocks, right? Hey, the way we have policies are hurting people and therefore reducing willingness to work hard. Okay, there was an article the other day about the enlisted pilots, right, on the Predator Reaper program that all of a sudden now fighting to get another job. And they were told one thing and that policy changed, right? Hey, you know what? My willingness to work hard isn't what it was because you're not taking care of me. Right. So there's culture rocks, there's resource rocks, there's training and operational tasking rocks, the number of programs in existence that have to be maintained. I mean, I think there's lots of things that are all kind of unique to each department and each unit in some ways. Right. But I think, finding out what those are is why we're here today, because I don't have those answers necessarily. Everyone has their own rock that they see, and it's getting them to be able to speak up about it. So, the next comment, right? Something has to change, right? We have to first admit that something's wrong. We cannot pretend or wish away that everything is fine, right? In logistics, we call this the 11th class of supply, fairy dust, right? It doesn't exist. Now we're in the hard requirements. We're in the hard logistics, hard limitations. There are issues, there are problems, and we must be willing to acknowledge that these problems exist, that they are real, and be willing to start to deal with them, right? We must be willing to admit what we cannot do, okay? Now, people see this as a scary point. People see this as a bad day, and yet I would argue until I know what I need to be able to do, and I accurately assess what I can and cannot do, I cannot accurately then fill in the gap, right? I can't make it better if I'm not willing to admit what it has to be and what it's not. Okay, and I think we're in this world of pretending that it's fine, and yet we have to start being honest with ourselves, right? We have to start being honest with what's going wrong and listen when someone brings up the problem. And that goes to my point on seeing the rocks as blessings, right? Using the water analogy, we must learn to deal with these rocks, right? The blessing, though, is that only by exposing the rocks can we improve them, but change is uncomfortable, okay? It's not fun to admit that my house is not in order. It's not fun to admit that we can't meet mission, right? But by admitting what I cannot do, I can start getting the necessary help to make it better, right? I start gaining buy-in and cultural adaptations and support because you're willing to listen when someone says, I can't. It doesn't say I can't because I'm not willing to. It says I can't because I need you to believe in me and let me be a part of the team, right? We might be able to fix it. And by admitting what I can't do, I can start finding solutions to get to what I need to be able to do. But we have to slow down enough to start addressing change, right? The first step in any recovery program is being willing to admit that the problem first exists. Right, back to AA. Hi, my name is Josh and I'm an alcoholic. Now, I'm not really an alcoholic, but that's how the conversation starts, right? I'm willing to admit that I have something that needs to be fixed. And until we get to the point that admitting that something needs to be fixed, you're never going to take any action to actually fix it. Okay, this not only applies to personnel recovery, but it also applies to any process improvement methodology or modernization effort, right? Why are we modernizing? Why are we trying to improve something? Because it's not meeting a standard. It's broken. Right? Broken doesn't mean permanently wrong. Broken just means let's make it better. And we want to be continuously improving. We want to make things better, yet we have a culture that says pretend like nothing's ever wrong, right? Some may disagree with that, so we're going to hate me for saying that, but fine, call it what it is. It's what I've seen at times, right? Some don't, some do. Some want yes men and women to just tell them how great it is and never bring up any problems. Some are willing to have those honest conversations and let their team be a part of the answers. Right? But once we admit the problem exists, we can start to identify solutions. Right.
Absolutely. And that gets into the idea of embracing the red. It gets into look at every qualified yes in your readiness reporting system. Is there anything beyond red and green, go, no go? A qualified yes oftentimes is a no we don't want to talk about. So you're hitting everything from personnel to true readiness issues in that comment, and I really appreciate that where that can take this conversation.
Oh, right. DERS is a worthless organization, right? I'm just going to call it what it is, and I've been blasted for this before as a G4 readiness officer on the Force Sync, right? Qualified yes to me means you're a no, and I wish the readiness reporting system was what are you snap in time today? What are you? Now, if you're not ready, that doesn't mean you're a failing leader. That means you have fortitude to actually say, I'm not ready today. Right? Then we can start looking at what would it take to get you ready and maybe change the readiness system to have a as of right now, and then a 30, 60, 90, 6-month, 1-year projection with a detailed requirements list to allow you to achieve a level of readiness, right? And in aviation, we had the full mission capable, partial mission capable, right? What if we applied that same concepts to organizations or hell to even individuals, that an individual TNR tracking system with a chain-to-chain model back to individual coding on capability, and when's the last time I actually used it, right? So I was a TNR manager in aviation. I've tried to bring this in to the ground side, but ground side readiness is usually based on an organization and the organization overall. But if we apply that individually, now we know where to focus training. Again, data and honesty gives you the ability to affect change. Wishing it away with qualified yeses is crap, right? Qualified yes means not ready. Let's just call it what it is. Then we can figure out what it takes to get ready so we can actually prepare the right way. So sorry, soapbox, Jerry, that is a hugely passionate topic on my end, and I got blasted for it saying, we just admit that DERS is crap. and then plan appropriately. And I got a pin drop of silence in the planning room with senior leaders, and then they just went back to what they were doing. So anyways, second piece here, right? Building a cultural foundation, or building a culture foundation, right? Trust and safety, right? The first step to leading in a constrained environment is establishing a culture of trust and empowerment. Okay, this goes back to Agile project management. We'll talk about that a little bit later, right? But without that safety, without that psychological safety, you cannot leverage your most valuable asset, which is a thinking airman. Okay? Our center of gravity is the individual. It is not our technology, but we have to get back to trusting that center of gravity. Right? So often I hear folks talk about agility or innovation or empowerment, yet they quickly bring in processes to the solution. Process without culture is waste. Right? And this is why I'll talk about theory of constraints and some other stuff later, right? Those are great process-driven things, but to take advantage of a process, I have to create a culture of safety, trust, and empowerment, and teach my team how to think and encourage them to speak up when they identify problems. So what does a culture of trust look like? Okay, these are actually taken from what you're taught in Agile, right? Every team member has equal value to contribute. Respect across the board. E1, O10, you are treated with the same value and respect. It's not about lack of rank, however, it's about equality in value of the individual. Okay, information has to be shared freely, good and bad, up and down. You cannot withhold secrets to the team if you want them to be able to think and participate. No one's beyond improvement or recommendation. There is no rank in an Agile team and a cultural safety team. Special Forces does this very well, and the aviation debrief world does this very well. Why? Because it's all about getting the job done right. If you are failing and you are messing up, the team is free to highlight areas of improvement. Again, respectfully, not belligerently, not out of context, but to say, look, sir, you might be the leader, but what you're doing right now is causing my life pain. It's making my life harder. It's causing me to do more work. Can we talk about change? Can we talk about ideas to make it better? Right? Don't just complain, bring solutions too. But I have to know that I'm safe to talk about things that bother me, or I'm never going to speak up. Okay? And then we're just blind, right? Leaders are blind to what's really going on because they're not getting the feedback from the most accurate intel in the world, the junior enlisted. Okay? A leader's job is to serve their team, remove the barriers to progress, and take on work that impedes team performance. Okay, in an Agile team, the senior leader does the menial tasks. Why? Because the team is the expert on doing the work. So if I want my team to be the expert on doing the work, I have to let them know that I'm there to care for them and sometimes own the lower ranking tasks at a higher level so my team can focus on being the expert at doing. Okay, leadership is service. Okay, and that's where it's so important. Again, through Agile culture. And the team matters more. Ultimately, it's not about who gets the credit. It's not about performance results. It's about team performance and respect across the board. Okay, if you're the quarterback, if you're the running back, if you're the water boy, I don't care who you are value added to my team, and I need to know that you're appreciated. And in your sphere, I want you to give me all the feedback you can to make your life better and our team better. So please speak up. Okay, changes with AFDP1, right? Going back to General Brown and the starting point of a lot of this stuff. We have to give airmen leeway without being prescriptive to lead and execute while still meeting intent. When airmen are empowered, they will be able to make things happen we didn't even think about. I agree, but that goes back to safety and trust. Leaders must push decision-making to the lowest competent, capable level using doctrine as a foundation for sound choices. Also, I agree. But to do that means I have to let go of control and let my team make decisions. And if they fail, defend them in their decision and coach them and mentor them to grow and improve, not punish them for failure, right? Go back to the zero defect assumption. You may not like it, but it's there, okay? Newest article just came out, again, from General Brown. What I'm encouraging airmen to do is move in a direction and in some cases ask for forgiveness, not permission. Make smart risk assessments as we do this, right? That level of trust is what I have in them. When I go out and talk to them, I go, I trust you, right? Go execute, right? This sounds great from the seat of the 4-star, and I believe in the statement. But if I am the junior enlisted and I have a non-trusting leader, this is career suicide to act upon, okay? So while I agree with the premise, it's easy to say when you're untouchable. It's much harder to say when your life depends on the opinion of senior leadership. Okay, nothing General Brown is trying to achieve is possible unless the airmen feel protected and empowered to think and act. It's career suicide as a junior leader to go against individual leadership and violate status quo. And to achieve change, the inhibitors of change must be removed or the innovators must be protected. Okay, my career ended for the exact same lack of cultural safety. Okay, I was not a yes man, and I saw my career die as a result. Okay, so I'm speaking from this because I maintained who I was and I still did what was right, but I am not a retiree for that same reason. Okay. Consistency to building trust, right? Along with feeling protected, airmen need to know that there is consistency. Constant change from the top leads to chaos at the bottom. Okay? Even more unknown change at the top that is only identified through experience at the bottom erodes trust. Okay, I'm going to give some harsh examples of this, right? Air Force School changes policy at whim with no communication. We've seen some of our students going through PMP training get retroactively pay docked because they didn't know policy had changed. And then they think that we're lying to them. And I'm like, no, it wasn't us. I'm sorry, we're trying to protect you, but I can't fix the system. But no one knows until they experience it. Okay, delays in E6 promotion after the promotion list came out, right? This is a recent one. A huge uproar. Hey, why didn't you tell me before you made the change so I can emotionally prepare for it rather than getting it inflicted upon me? Okay, as a certified change manager and a passionate individual in change, communication before change seldom happens in the military. And yet again, now in a constrained environment, these have catastrophic results. Okay, COVID policies and the other honorable discharge for those who stood up for their beliefs, right? Whether you have the authority or not to make the call is not in debate. The reality, though, is that that is now having emotional consequences on retention. Okay, now that COVID has changed, the policies haven't been changed back, and yet people are still being forced out. Again, I'm not here to have the debate on whether you believe in it or not. The reality is it's having an impact, and it's not being communicated or being willing to listen to when people say it's wrong. Okay, all of these erode trust in the system that is advocating for folks to take chances. Back to General Brown's guidance. You want me as an airman to take a risk in a system that is notorious for screwing those who violate and take risks. Okay, if you want to create innovators, you must protect them or change the system overall. And the human element, right? We must consider the individual's fuel tank of our teams as something that is concrete like a fuel tank. Okay, it's easy to understand that if I don't fill the tank and drive the vehicle until it's dry, the vehicle won't move. Yet people are not really any different, right? The difference, though, is that a human has a capacity to perform tasks well beyond their designed function, okay? If I can fill the tank of my team, I'm going to see them do an amazing thing. I'm going to see them expand well beyond what they were designed or hired to do within their AFSC. But if I keep running them on empty, I'm going to see everybody leave in droves, okay? We have to find a way to invest in our team, make them be appreciated, and let them know that we care about them and will protect them, which is part of our passion in training and integrating industry while active duty. So not only can I make you more effective today, right, through project management, but I can create job credibility at the exact same time. So when you leave, you have a choice and you are empowered to take care of you and your family. All right.
That is so important. Just real quick, that fact that we are running airmen into the ground to some extent. We rely on the thoroughbreds and we sometimes wear them out while others have the capacity. Our inability to accept risk, or we say at the senior level, we're going to accept risk in, but those 4 airmen down at the bottom are like, hey, that risk is meat. And communication of those requirements, communication of the why, getting back, I've heard so much of the leadership and the management books that I've read in the last decade and the things you've said and addressed here. It is so important because we live and die by our airmen. I don't care what tools we get until we get robots can do the tasks of our E1s, 18-year-olds fresh out of high school. We will not be successful without them on our team, invested, understanding. And if we get the tools that we're about to talk about in the hands of those young people, call it the maybe E1s and E2s too early, but the E3s, the E5s and 6s, we get into the O1s to O3s. That's what LOAU is trying to do here. We know where the smart risks are. We know where the risks become unacceptable. And at the end of the day, we go through this together and with trust and with confidence and with an ability to say, hey, that didn't work. Let's hot wash why and make sure that next time we do it better. Because maybe the solution you tried didn't work, but some variant is the advance we actually needed. We learned so much through those failures. So Josh, it's so important as we move into the tools that we understand that piece. The tool is irrelevant. The tool will not work until the people trust us enough to implement those tools outside of the one that 21101 says you must do. The TO says you must do. Those have been written in blood to some extent, but as we think, we might be able to find flexibility, and it's beyond efficiency. It is effectiveness.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. And I think, again, in a very clearly defined mission world, which I'll talk predictive and adaptive environments a little bit later, it's easier to plan and say, this is the need. But if I go from a predictive world to an adaptive world that says, I'm not sure what we're going to get, that means I have to give and empower lower and teach people to make decisions where they are and teach them how to think and be willing to let them fail sometimes in a controlled environment like Garrison, so that when we go overseas and bullets are flying downrange, it's not the first time I've ever had to decide on my own when the comms go out, right? So again, hugely passionate topic, but we'll hit some of that here in a minute, right? So what are the tools to lead effectively, right? Some of these are known and some of these you guys may have not heard of or think of them in different ways. All right, so integrating industry best practices, right? Industry cares most about high quality customer satisfaction and the tempo and accuracy or product design and development. Right? Tempo is not a military concept, right? Tempo is something that industry greatly cares about, and they have to make sure they do it with a high level of fidelity and quality, because if I cannot keep tempo with customer needs, if I cannot keep tempo with change in technology, if I keep tempo with my competitors, I'm going to get beat, right? And if I keep tempo, but I do it with a lower level of quality, I'm going to get beat by brand failure, because people are going to go to the quality product because people vote with their wallets, right? So industry cares a lot about tempo and quality and efficiency, right? Number one thing a business cares about is customer satisfaction and profitability, because that's what the world runs on. That's what project managers care the most about as well, right? So everything we do falls into that category. And in a military sense, that is satisfying commanders' intent, right? And resource management. Okay, we don't deal with profit in the same way, but you are dealing with resource management the same way, that says I have so much stuff and I have to plan and execute within that boundary of resources, or I'm not going to be able to satisfy commander's intent. All right. So training and certifications already exist to provide this foundation. We just have to stop looking at them as civilian and start looking at them as military PME. Things to consider, right? Now I'll talk through each of these, right? Theory of constraints. Near and dear to the logistics community, right? Talk. It's a great way to assess a problem. Okay, Lean Six Sigma tools. I'm not going to hit Lean specifically in the beginning, but there are things that Lean Six talks about that are great ways to analyze a problem. The capability-based assessment process, right? The CBA. This is a known acquisition tool. It's a great lens to look at problem framing, right? The PM toolbox. This to me is a trifecta between Agile PMP and Lean Six Sigma. I'm going to walk through that a little bit, again, as a capability set. Right? So theory of constraints, right? What is it? For those that don't know, simply assess the system for throughput capacity, identify the weakest link, subjugate everything below the capacity of my weakest link, fix it, and then move on to the next one. It's simple. It's not hard. Look, I'm having a problem. My constraint is this. Don't keep running the whole system at full capacity, right? The Goal is a great book. If you guys want to read it about this one, right? It allows you to look at the system in its entirety and say, why am I operating the system at full capacity if one segment's only working at 20% capacity? That's waste, right? Waste is a Lean Six concept. However, back to culture, if I don't let my team speak up and say, this is dumb as shit, right? To be belligerent, like, why am I doing this? It's wasting my time. Then I'm not going to take advantage of the fact that someone has a solution. Right? How do I know as a leader the system's broken if the system isn't communicating back to me that something's wrong? Again, back to culture and safety. Okay, removing waste, right? Value stream mapping is a great way to build a process map. Let me identify all the touch points and then assess, was this step necessary? If it wasn't, get rid of it. Right? Job security. Why is there so much bureaucracy? Because everyone wants to say valuable and important. And if I don't have this job anymore to sign a paper in triplicate, I'm not important. Maybe you're not, and it's time for you to move on, right? Now, from a businessman perspective, this is called waste and I pay for it, right? Why am I paying for things I don't need, right? And labor is expensive, right? Labor is actually the most expensive thing you will ever manage in the civilian world. It's actually one of the highest dollar figure budgets in the military above all programs. It's the cost of the airmen. So why am I wasting time and resources, personnel on processes that are not necessary, right? So value stream map it, assess it. And if it doesn't need to be there, get rid of it. But the SOP said, I don't care. But the policy said, why? And then rewrite the policy. But before I can rewrite the policy, get rid of the process anyway, because it's not necessary, right? Ask for forgiveness. I skipped it. Why? It wasn't worth it anymore. If it's not adding value, it's not necessary. Remove it. Value stream mapping or spaghetti diagram can also assess flow, right? Flow-based waste and efficiency. Why is this routing in this process when I map it? Because it seems like I'm doubling back a lot. Okay, this is where lean comes into play. 5 why concept. It's a 6 Sigma process. If I want to figure out the root cause of a problem, ask the word why 5 times. Why did this happen? Because this happened. Why did that thing happen? Because this other thing happened. Why did that thing happen? Because this other thing happened. Why did that happen? Because the person was uneducated, ill-informed, and didn't have the authority to make the decision they wanted. Great, let's fix that, right? Let's fix the root cause of the problem, right? And I apply this in many ways, but I also talk about this in solutions, right? I call it David and Goliath problem set. Many times leaders want to help their team. So like King Saul in the Bible story, he gives David all of his armor to help him go fight a giant, right? All David wanted to tell the king is, I'm going to go kill the guy. I didn't need your help. I just wanted you to know, right? But leaders feel like they have to do something. So we do something and inadvertently burden our team with the wrong solution to a problem they didn't even say was a problem, right? So before you fix the problem, assess what the root cause is going to be. And this is a tool to use to do it. And Lean 6 is known in the Air Force. I think you guys just hired a self-paced CBT model, which is great for exposure, yet these things to be applied require you to have a coach, someone to talk you through how to do this. And then as I learn it, I have to be empowered to actually make change. If I'm not empowered, I have a tool sitting on a shelf that's never being used. Okay, back to culture and why culture is so important. All right, the CBA process, right? A little bit of an eye chart, but I'm starting with a CONOP. Higher leadership in the Air Force says, this is my concept, this is my idea. Right, the next step, once I have the environment and the context of what I'm operating in, I have to identify the tasks necessary to accomplish this new idea, right? These start with UJITLs, typically metals, METs, metals, everything, different services have different requirements lists, but those say all the things I have to be able to do at this point, right? Well, then I have to assess what I can actually do. Okay, and this is where this honesty comes into play. Look, these are all the tasks necessary with resource mapping to get this mission done, but then I have to step back and go, this is what I can currently do. This is my as is state. This is my need to be or to be state. And there's a gap in between. And where there's a gap, we have to be honest and say, no, we can't do that. Okay. Once I identify these gaps, I can do a risk analysis on the severity and likelihood of that gap, right? What happens if I don't mitigate it? What happens if we let it exist currently? What happens if I do nothing to fill in this gap? What's the consequence and what's the severity and the likelihood going to look like? Okay, once I identify that, then I can choose which gaps I want to prioritize finding solutions for. These are high likelihood, high consequence. Those we need to fix right now. Okay, great. What are the possible solutions for that? So then we bring in the experts. Now, typically these are done in vacuums of acquisition folks or whoever, and they start putting solutions together. Like, well, let's bring in some E1s and E3s and E5s to start throwing solutions on the board. Hey, what do you think the solution could be to this problem, right? And this doesn't have to only apply to acquisitions. This can apply to a squadron leadership idea, right? Hey guys, this is my idea. This is my commander's intent. Okay, great. What are the tasks necessary to achieve this intent? Okay, what can we currently do? What can't we do? All right, what do you think would fix it? Okay, so solutions development is brainstorming all these ideas, right? And then I look at implementation, right? The solutions fall into 2 categories. Right, the .mlpf change request or the DCR. Okay, these are non-purchasing things typically. Look, I need a doctrine change, an organizational change. I need more training. Right, little m, I need more of the stuff that's already procured. I just don't have enough of it. So please buy me more of this already approved thing. Right, personnel, facilities, or policy. Okay, what needs to change for me to achieve this objective? And then you have the acquisition, the big M in acquisitions, the ICD, the CDD process, right? There's a capability I need that we don't currently have, and I need to design a solution. Right now, I'm applying this again from an acquisition context, but the same process could be used for human performance. It could be applied for squadron leadership. It could be applied for manpower, right? The same thing could be done, but the critical element is honesty in the gaps and creativity in the solutions, right? And bringing the right people into the room to speak up, have a voice, listen to them, let them be a part of the solutioning. And back to change management gone wrong. If the solution is designed by the person who has to execute it, they're much more willing to support it, right? Hey, it wasn't the king dumping armor on me. It was David coming in and saying, I need a sling. Great, I got one for you, right? So again, it goes back to how we want to identify and implement change. Starts with empowerment. All right, a slide near and dear to my heart, right? The leadership toolbox and what we're trying to achieve. Project management, Agile. It's about small teams and rapid change. Right? How I do as much as possible with the small team that I have to understand that change is required and desired and allow everyone to speak up. The entire list of cultural safety I talked about earlier comes from Agile project management. And Lean Six Sigma, this is known as about efficiency and quality. How do I optimize the workforce and the value stream maps of what I'm doing and improve the quality of the output? How do you measure it? What do you do about it? And when I identify something that needs to be changed, how do I run the project to implement the change? Right, and then PMP, again, these are all industry things, right? Project management professional. Okay, the strategic end. I'm going to show you another slide in a second that maps this out in a different way. But Lean is taught in Agile as efficiency. Six Sigma is taught in PMP as quality, and half the PMP exam is Agile, right? So these things become a continuum of capability that we can start at E4. Right? Agile requires 1.5 years of experience. What if every E4 and E5 was certified in Agile or our second lieutenants? Let me teach you about leading in a change environment with the tools to not make chaos, but controlled plan where change is expected. Maybe by E5 or E6, I'm teaching them Lean Six Sigma. Now you're in that leadership role and you want to optimize your workforce. Let me teach you and give you tools to make you effective, to be able to streamline bureaucratic stuff and make change. And then by E6 to E7, right, you can get your PMP. Right? Let me add the strategic top to this whole thing to give you a new way to think, because no mission like a project is ever one thing. There are knowns and unknowns. There are timelines, there are deliverables, there's intent and idea versus constraint, right? These are all different. And I have to teach people ways to think and plan and lead beyond the joint planning process. JPP is fantastic if I want to go kill shit. It's not so good at doing a maintenance upgrade, right? And at the same time, if I look at what these certs do in industry, there's over 1 million jobs looking for those capabilities. Theory of constraints is fantastic. CBA is fantastic. Nobody cares in industry that you have those things. Okay, so why don't we start pulling best of industry to make airmen better today and make job credibility at the exact same time? Because now I know I don't have to stay anymore. And if I leave, I'm not jumping without a parachute, right? I'm leaving because somebody cared about me and helped me become more effective now and be credible later. All right, another way to look at the same problem set, we call it the triple constraint, right? Scope, cost, and schedule. Okay, the mission in a predictive environment is fixed. The big blue arrow doesn't change. I have to put a detailed plan in terms of time and resources to execute that mission. Okay, in an adaptive environment, my resources and time are fixed. My job is to see how much mission I can get done. Okay, so looking at this, the strategic end is much more predictive because change at the top makes chaos at the bottom. We talked about this earlier. However, in a tactical environment, the lower end, I want my team embracing change. I want them thinking out of the box. I want everyone to speak up and throw it on the wall and identify ways to make it better. In the operational world, you see where these things kind of merge together, right? And this is our continuum, right? Start with Agile, move on to Lean, then move to PMP if we can. They also align with the experience needs to be certified, right? PMP requires 5 years of experience. Again, not great for an E3. It's the wrong tool at the wrong time. But we can make leaders effective as they grow through industry, right? And not to bash the Air Force, but on the Army side, they've seen that education isn't just about degrees anymore. Right? They created the Credentialing Assistance Program that allows soldiers to use TA now to pursue certs. The Coast Guard just created the exact same program. Coast Guard CA, same thing. Why don't I allow individuals to pursue education relative to DoD cool approved certifications, right? Why don't we nest these things together? And I'd be glad to talk AF-Cool policy change, and that's a talk for another day, to mirror actually what the DoD does that Air Force doesn't, right? So we can protect people. All right, reinforcing culture as a foundation, right? Process, no matter which one is chosen without a culture of trust and empowerment, is simply adding waste, red tape, and it will hurt any change initiative, right? All the processes are fantastic, but process without culture does not change anything, and it just burdens the individual. All right, a couple more slides. The need to say no. Ultimately, when we want to use any of the methodologies, we must come to the conclusion that something's broken. Okay, we must create a preference for brutal honesty. We must admit when we are out of capacity and our team says, no, I can't right now. That doesn't mean no forever. It just means no, I can't unless something changes. Right? Through this identification of a limitation or a constraint, we can now identify solutions and recommendations for change. Okay? No is not an end. No is a now what comment. Right? Through empowerment, we can let our most impacted airmen identify the solutions that matter to them. Right? So what if we say no? Right? What if we allowed our airmen to voice their concerns and we actually listen to them? When a teammate says, no, I can't right now, and we defend them, right? When we push back on a new operational requirement because we know we're already at a deficit. We're at a human deficit. Yeah, there's a risk. We're working the weekend. They've worked 5 weekends in a row. How about we just say no to hire at this point and say, I can't do it? What if qualified yes was really a qualified no right now in DERS? Okay. When we give our team rest and protect them and their families. Or what if when we realize that something has to give right now, it's our equipment and not our airmen? Right? Again, this is where hard leadership comes into play. Make that assessment, protect your team. Stop defending your career and start defending your people. The positive impact of no. By listening and empowering our airmen, we create safety. By protecting our airmen, we allow them to take chances and think. By being willing to invite honest discord, we can identify the foundational issues and start to fix them. By allowing our team to fail and self-organize, we move unnecessary burden from senior leaders and actually leverage the full capability of our team. By integrating the best of industry, we can learn and improve. And there's hope. All right, I'm highlighting what some may say is extreme, but for many, this is their reality. I want to bring an equal message of hope, right? Airmen are resilient and change is possible. Okay, conclusion and wrapping this up, leading, planning, and executing in a constrained environment is different. Many leaders today have never had to lead in this environment. Building a culture of trust and empowerment is key. That is the foundation. We must admit that something is broken in order to implement change. And leveraging and empowering and listening to our airmen up and down the chain of command is the best way to find solutions. Okay, my concluding statement, the most effective weapon in the battle space is a thinking service member and their weapon. We must find a way to improve on thought and empower decision-making at the lowest possible rank. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure to present. I look forward to seeing you all at LOA 2023 to continue this conversation as able on how do we affect the right change to build the force we need in the peer fight. Jerry, thank you for your time today.
Hey, Josh, thank you. You have hit some really important points talking about culture, and how a leader who really is in their proper space can accept some risk and listen to their airmen. They will be there. They will be trusted. That they will not only hear problems when they're trusted, they will be able to help solve those problems. And whether it's a 1-year assignment or a 4-year assignment, as we talk about the future of the officer and enlisted assignments, we can actually get after some major problems. Starting with that saying no, in a fire, you need, the spark, you need the fuel, and you need air. That opportunity to say no is creating that oxygen that will feed that flame. Without the flame, it's going to smolder. You're never going to get there. And we have so much on our plates as we go forward. I am excited to hear where this can take people if they think about that aspect of, if you say that new requirement is one too many, we need to take a knee this weekend, that is good for our people. That will help with mental, with their physical, with all of the aspects of their well-being, and ultimately improve mission effectiveness as they come back refreshed when you let them take a knee and then get right back after it. In the spring, when we're going to give you a longer in-person opportunity with a group, and St. Louis, it's going to be phenomenal. I'm so excited to see that happen. I wish we could do questions here live, and just the format doesn't let us, but the contact information on the screen to the audience, Josh will absolutely get back to you as quickly as you can. I encourage you to reach out. And on the training piece of it, you know, I have seen more 05s and 06s go through some of these classes and certifications in my sphere than I have seen the CGOs and the NCOs and the senior NCOs who are out there able to apply these skills. We've got to put the tools in the hands of our airmen, you know, civilians, military, officer, enlisted, at this younger age, so that they can have them and they can implement them. And, you know, it's great to have senior leaders who can think, but man, what an awesome problem it would be if we have to help the senior leaders catch up, because the tools are already out there. That this is just such an important conversation. I greatly appreciate your time today. And with that, Josh, if you have any closing comments as we move in.
Well, but please reach out, right? Networking is reaching out and finding people to have answers to your problems. So if I can be a resource for you, if you are a vet in transition and wanting to know how certs apply to the job hunt, if you are curious about lines of funding and unit funding, or how do we make these changes together, I'd love to throw it on the wall. Even if I'm not the answer to your solution, I just enjoy helping people. So thank you, Jerry. Thank you, LOAU, for the time. Everyone, I look forward to seeing you in the spring.
Thank you, Josh.